It's the biggest audience for the show of the year, I'll warrant. Certainly it felt that way on social media, and why not? It's been the mother of all weeks at Westminster, and we'll be surveying the scene and looking forward to what might happen next. I can do so from the vantage point of having spent almost 30 years in the House of Commons and having seen the defenestration of several political leaders. And that seems to be what we are facing now. But that's not the only subject on the order paper. We'll be talking about the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty, who's been visiting Britain. Aren't we doing well? Aren't we doing well as the fifth largest economy in the world? And 40 years plus membership of the fabulous European Union, the United Nations are sending us rapporteurs to investigate the state of extreme poverty in the nation. Particularly, I want to concentrate this evening on children. If I tell you that in 2018, in the world's fifth biggest economy, a member state of the European Union, almost 1 in 2 children in Britain are poor. That's right. Almost 1 in 2 are poor. 1.5 million people in Britain, according to the United Nations rapporteur, are living in destitution. Let me spell that out. Destitution. We're hoping to catch the author himself, the rapporteur himself, just before he gets back on a plane to New York to deliver the dread news to the United Nations itself. We'll also be talking about the death of the kilo. Turns out that the kilo that we use as the standard measure, has, by some wear and tear mysterious to me, lightened by the weight of an eyelash, and therefore will have to be replaced because, of course, well, these measurements have got to be right. Now, I confess, as a man of my age and class, I have absolutely no idea about kilos or grams or kilometres or metres or any other metric, which is quite difficult when you're in the car with young children who know nothing but metric and a foreign wife who knows nothing about imperial, except that our country was a colony of an empire for, well, a couple of 100 years. So I'm not suggesting it will be easy to convert you. But here's my take. When we Brexit, we should go back entirely to imperial measures. Hotel California, I suppose we could play. And let me tell you this, it's 7:09 and 11 seconds. Good time to tell you, my Kickstarter.com for my film, Killing Kelly, on the strange death of David Kelly, is now open for business. Go to it in the course of this 3 hours, and we'll keep you updated as to how it's going. I'll be making that film with John White, my old friend that's a frequent guest on the show. He'll be doing the script. My old friend Sean Murray, the celebrated and award-winning Irish director, co-directing the film, and I'll be making it with 2 of my former guests on here, Miles Goslett and the former Liberal Democrat government minister, Norman Baker. Killing Kelly on Kickstarter.com. Go to it, please. You'll find it on Twitter also. But let me start, if I may, with what has happened. And that wasn't a pun. I've got the Times in front of me, which I think captures the story best in today's newspapers, though other brands are available. The Times, above, a kind of haggard picture, and hasn't she aged, of the Prime Minister, carries this headline: Lonely May staggers on. Bullet points: PM savaged as ministers quit over Brexit. Bullet point: Tory rebels call for leadership vote. Bullet point: Gove on brink after rejecting new job. Let me start with the last one first. Michael Gove, I consider, on a personal level, a friend of mine. You've heard me say that before. I make no apology for it, and I don't let other people pick my friends. But Michael Gove rejecting the Secretary of State for Brexit position was a matter of acute calculation by him. I stress I haven't spoken to him. This is just my knowledge of him and of this situation. The reason Michael Gove turned down the Brexit Secretaryship of State, which has gone to someone whose name has already escaped my memory, Steve Wright, is it, in the afternoon? Stephen Barclay. I have no idea who he is, and neither do you, if you're being honest. But Gove turned it down, but he hasn't resigned from the cabinet, and here's why. He hasn't resigned from the cabinet because there is about to be a leadership challenge in the Conservative Party. 48 letters are already in, I can tell you. And far more than 48 will be in over the next 72 hours or perhaps a little more. So, Michael Gove's calculation, and he is a supreme calculator, is that he'll get some brownie points for not abandoning the sinking ship of Theresa May, and he will be, he hopes, the strongest pro-Brexit candidate left standing. He pledged his loyalty, but it was, in a way, a pledging of his disloyalty. He intends to be a runner, and he might win, and he's a very clever man. He may be the cleverest of all the Tory candidates that are in the race. Of course, the Tory MPs that are piling in now, Remainers as well as Leavers, by the way, are determined to repeat what happened in Margaret Thatcher's day. So let me go back to those days. I was there. The corridors of power were filled with hard-faced men with wet cheeks, literally tears in their eyes, including ministers like Malcolm Rifkind, like Kenneth Clarke, and others who had been in and told the Prime Minister to her face that they could not see how she could survive. I remind you, given what you've just heard Lord Heseltine say on the news, isn't he a paragon of a man to give advice on loyalty to his leader and not challenging sitting prime ministers? He was clucking that Mrs. May will win the no confidence motion vote. And of course she will. So did Mrs. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher won the no confidence vote. But so many votes had been cast against her that it became untenable, incredible, in the literal sense of the word, for her to continue. And her prime ministership was at an end. And then her wet eyes were just visible, because cameras weren't as good then as they are now through the back seat window of that car. I believe the same thing will happen before I address you again next Friday on the mother of all talk shows. Let me turn briefly, because time is my enemy, to the vote on the deal. There will be many who reject the deal because they want to stay in the European Union with whistles and bells on. And they sense that from this turmoil of a failure of the May Brexit deal to pass in the House, some straw might emerge onto which they can clutch and save their beloved membership of the EU. There are others, scores of others, who will reject the deal because they say it means no Brexit at all. In fact, they, like me, let me put my cards on the table, believe that actually we'd be better off staying in the European Union than to exit it on the terms that Mrs. May has negotiated. This is not Brexit in name only. This is worse than staying in the EU for the following reasons. It would establish us for the first time in 1,000 years, 1,000 years, as a vassal state. Everyone's using that term now. Go to your dictionary and see its definition. It means a nation which is subordinate to other nations. That is to say, those other nations can tell it what to do. That's worse than where we are now, because at least where we are now, we have, albeit a lesser crew, sitting in the European Parliament. We have ministers, albeit oftentimes less than adequate, sitting at the table when the EU decisions are being made. Under May's Brexit deal, we will have neither. No members of the European Parliament, no seat at the European councils, yet obliged, and here's the point, potentially forever, to take the rules that the European Union gives us. Why do I say that? Because the only way that we can leave it under the May terms, which are worse than Chequers, by the way, by a country kilometre, they're worse than Chequers, is by the joint agreement of the EU and us. Well, what if the EU never agrees? Never. What if it says no, 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 to coin a phrase that General de Gaulle once used? Put an N on the end of that. No, no, no. You may not leave the single market. You may not leave the customs union. Therefore, the so-called backstop in which the whole of the United Kingdom, in fact, will be entwined with the European Union is potentially forever. That's before I go into issues of fisheries and so on, which I could, and which Michael Gove is staying on to do his best to turn the tide on. The reality is, we are not leaving the EU if Mrs. May's negotiated deal goes through. But it's not going to go through. It cannot go through. The numbers don't add up. Because Labour will resolutely vote Mrs. May down. So will the SNP. So will the DUP, imagine. So will the Liberal Democrats, if there are any left by then. And so will at least 50 Conservative MPs. Do the maths. Mrs. May depends every day for her parliamentary majority on any matter on the 10 MPs of the DUP. So this cannot pass, will not pass. And thus the whole country will be pledged and plunged into absolute political stasis. There are several ways that stasis could be broken. The best one, by far, is for Her Majesty to decide that only the country itself can rule on where Britain goes next. General election now. That's what I say. That's what I hope she'll say. But I want to hear what you say. 0344 499 1000, or email me via the website at talkradio.co.uk, or text me, texting the word talk followed by your message to 87222, but that will cost you 25p. That's 12pence halfpenny, plus normal charges. Or you can tweet me for free at George Galloway at Talk Radio.